Hello, my viewers. I'm Srinivasan, a fine art photographer and a long distance skater. This is only for people who are coming for this channel for the very first time. And we have a wonderful personality and an influencer in the world of long distance skating, Mr. Don Sandusky. He has a Ph.D. and he is owner designer at SUPskate and Hamboards, and he's a IDSA Ultra Skate sponsor as well. So, this interview is going to be based on one of the wonderful and the most technical article that was authored by Mr. Don Sandusky himself in the page of or in the blog page of Hamboards. I'll leave the QR code for that in the video later. And that article is talking about longboard carving versus surf skating versus long distance pumping, which otherwise called as LDP. Okay, you can substitute for pushing, but here we're only talking about pumping. Okay, so the questions were based on this article, and sir was so generous for agreeing for this interview. Welcome, sir.
That's nice to be here.
Great. So, what are the forces acting in carving and surf skating and long distance skating? Can you help me name them?
Yeah. Well, if in this article, I looked at skateboarding, longboarding in 2 dimensions, not 3 dimensions. So I'm, for the sake of this exercise, I'm only focusing on the plane of the ground. I'm not focusing on forces in vertical. Okay. And so that allows the viewer to only consider forces applied by the feet, okay, through the legs, in, let's say, the left and right directions as a person is skating forward. So all of the forces that I've shown here are really applied by the feet, either in the direction that the skateboard is going, or opposite that. So it's only the feet pushing, moving this way. So if these were the legs and my fingernails were the feet, I'm talking about forces applied to the board by the rider by essentially twisting their core.
Cool. Sir, can you have any forces in particular technically for people to name or like understand a name, like what?
Okay.
Like when they're twisting, say like something with physics, like we have this kind of lateral force going from here, that.
Okay, so the rider,
centrifugal, pedal, whatever.
If this kind of the most technical and simplest way to say this is, if the rider pushes their front foot in the direction that the axle is steering at just the right moment, they will create a forward thrust vector on the system, which pulls the rider forward. Similarly, with their back foot, if they push the back of the board in the direction that the back trucks are pointed, they will create a forward force vector with the back foot also. But a lot of times whenever riders make a hard cut or a turn, they actually are leaning and only pushing backwards with both of their feet. And that essentially cancels out the rear thrust vector with a front drag vector.
Okay.
So all the rider really needs to do is push in the opposite direction with their front foot, and now they get 2 forward thrust vectors. And I have illustrations in the blog that explain that.
Absolutely. The blog itself is way too technical and it is self-explanatory. I just want like for our viewers to like get some simple stuff. And directly from you. So thank you so
Yeah.
much for those
Yeah. You're welcome.
little snippets. So you mentioned that front of the board can pull and the rear can push. The rider forward, rider, like it kind of pull and push the rider forward at the same time.
Mhm.
And can you simplify this explanation for global audiences? And like,
Okay.
I originally thought that front truck pulls while the rear truck would actually follow the front truck, like,
Mhm.
and what other forces act on the rear truck? How does that justify the calling like it is pushing, like it is
Okay.
contributing something for the forward motion?
Yeah. So we need to back up and first think about where the center of turning is on the board. Okay. If you have a
Mm-hmm.
typical
Mm-hmm.
longboard, it turns equally from the front and it turns equally from the back in a counter steering
Mm-hmm.
configuration. Okay. And that means that
Mm-hmm.
when you lean the board, it turns to the in one direction the same amount that it turns in the opposite direction, right? So that's how you can make these boards really turn in very tight turning radiuses. All right.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have a board with the same, like a typical longboard has reverse kingpin trucks on it, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And they have a certain amount of turning in the front and the equal amount of turning in the back in the opposite direction, right? That's a
Mm-hmm.
centered board.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very different are the LDP bracket boards that you see people doing long distances on.
Mm-hmm.
Those mostly turn from the front. In fact, they almost don't turn in the rear at all. It's almost as if the rear is on a pivot
Mm-hmm.
or is fixed. It's
Mm-hmm.
just coasting along.
Mm-hmm.
And in that configuration, the center of turning of the board is all the way back at the back axle. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So when people are creating forward, when people are pumping an LDP board, the rear, since it's not turning, cannot create force, nor can it create drag.
Okay.
So the board can only create forward thrust from the front, and that's
Mm-hmm.
pulling the rider forward.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Because because the forces are coming from in front of the rider, they're
Mm-hmm.
being pulled.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So now a different configuration still
Mm-hmm.
is whenever you have a rear foot turning center of the board. People do this all the time with riser blocks and angled decks, and
Mm-hmm.
people are always trying to find the right combination of wedge, either
Yeah.
through the deck shape or wedges or
Mm-hmm.
different trucks on the front and rear.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times people end up with all different types of approaches with their board that
Mm-hmm.
has the center of turning right under the rear foot,
Mm-hmm.
which is a really comfortable way to
Mm-hmm.
ride a car. I'm sorry, it's a comfortable way to ride a vehicle. In fact, automobiles, I'm pretty sure most automobiles are designed with the center of turning to be directly behind the driver's seat's butt.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Because the driver is the most important person in an automobile to be comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Um, if you've ever ridden in a long school bus, for example,
Mm-hmm.
you know that you can be sitting way behind the center of turning in that thing or way in
Mm-hmm.
front of it. It's really weird. You get all these different forces in the school bus when you're in one of those seats.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm wandering here. But whenever you have
Understood.
a skateboard that's set up where the center of turning is under the rear foot,
Mm-hmm.
now what you can do is you can also create a forward thrust vector from the back
Mm-hmm.
foot. Although the biggest force vector is going to be where you have the most turning. So it's going to be pulling you more than it's going to be pushing you from the rear.
Mm-hmm.
And it all depends on the type of board you have. So, it's so mystifying to talk to skaters about how they pump, right? And the thing is there are different pumping techniques that are entirely dependent on the way your board is set up. So I tried to illustrate with short GIF videos, riders demonstrating the carving form of creating forward thrust compared to the Surfskate and compared to the strict pumping. So Surfskating is mostly a back foot centered turning setup. And carving, you know, I've seen people on 4 foot long reverse kingpin longboards creating so much forward force they never have to foot push, and it's because they're switching the direction that they're pushing with their feet. And the blog is really meant, I had to write the blog because people were asking me questions without providing me the context of the type of board they were riding on. And I see all these opinions from people saying, oh, you can't pump a Hamboard. You know, they don't pump. They don't work right. And then I'm saying, well, wait a minute. If you had the I could set up one of my Hamboards for your riding style and you'll be able to pump it no problem. But you have to let me tell you which configuration is set up. And to be honest with you, I got a little bit frustrated at the online critics of my Hamboards saying that they don't pump, when I know it's because you're not riding it the way it's set up for.
I understand.
And if you want to ride that way, I can send you a different set of trucks and you'll be able to have a great time.
That's amazing. So, that's amazing.
And also, you know, since I'm putting riders at the Ultraskate in the direct path of people who are using very sophisticated LDP bracket boards, right? But they want to ride my gear, my SUPskate boards, right? So I have to educate them a little bit and say, okay, I'm going to put a 55 on the front. I'm going to put a 0 on the rear. I'm going to give you a really long wheelbase. And you don't have to take my word for it. Our guys were pumping very fast, not as fast as, you know, the world record LDP guys are going, but for a bunch of overweight 50-year-old guys, you know, going out and competing on the world's biggest LDP stage, they did very, very well.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. So I understand, like when you're using a little more effort with your back foot, you tend to create that, you know, the push feel from your rear trucks.
You have to almost scissor. You have to switch the direction you're pushing with your front and back feet, illustrated in the blog. And
amazing. Yeah.
Just like that, you'll start feeling the pull from the front
and the push from the back. That's awesome.
And push from the back, but not on an LDP board. An LDP board with no turning in the rear, it can't push you.
Yeah. I understand. I understand.
Okay.
Sir, this is out of the prepared questions, as in like, can a tapered wheel, say like a sharp lip or a round tip wheel, or a wheel which is a little bit tapered, or a flex in a deck can help a little bit more, in the thrust?
I based on what I understand about the engineering, anything that causes a wheel to change its shape. So if you have a wheel with a wide, I can't find the word right now. A wide wheel that can
contact
flex,
patch. Okay.
And change shape. It will give you more traction for your turn. So the wheel will slide a little bit less,
Mm-hmm.
but you'll burn energy by changing the shape of the wheel. You'll just lose energy because
I understand.
think about it. Think about how hard it is to squeeze that wheel with your fingers and change its shape, and then it goes
Yes.
back.
Yes.
Well, you're having to use that much energy from the ground to change the shape of the wheel.
I understand.
So that's just going to spill speed. It's going to spill energy. So for me, in pumping and surf skating and carving, if your objective is to create forward thrust vectors, I advise a large diameter, narrow wheel with very rigid sidewalls.
Okay. Thank you so much. That was amazing. Why are Hamboards or SUPskate truck-based boards better than a fork-based setups? Can you compare the functionality of the centered, back foot, and rear axle setups for a fork-based system?
Yeah, and for the record, I didn't say they were better. So because I just think they're different. I just think they're different. Okay. You know, the fork rear, I have watched people go by me at Ultraskate so many times that I've really only seen these boards running from behind them as they go farther away from me, right? So I'm not an expert on the fork, but I will say it's a brilliant concept, and it springs back. It allows the board to twist while the rider is creating all of the forward thrust from making the front of the board turn. So it's a neat way to allow the deck to twist and not have the wheel lift off the ground. It's a brilliant way to do that. It's almost like taking the length of the board and having the front part of the board be more rigid and having the rear part of the board be extremely flexible for twisting. It's a really good idea.
Cool.
And it really helps deaden the rear end so that you don't get drag.
Okay.
So I think it's a great technology. It just plain works. And kudos to those guys for making that. I wouldn't say that the HST truck system, the Zero that we have, if you didn't know it was back there, you probably wouldn't realize that it's different than a fork. Because if you make the Zero base plate and you take out the bushing and you make it really loose, it's just another dead rear. And the wheels don't lift off the ground. You could even do it with a reverse kingpin truck or an Indy truck. If you just took the bushings out or sawed off the bushings and left it really, really loose, if there was 0 degrees, you'd have to wedge the back to 0 in order for it to be truly dead. Now, some people don't really like a fully dead rear. They like 10 degrees, 20 degrees, 15 degrees, 5 degrees, just so they can feel it back there a little bit. But I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, in a certain way, we were more into rear axle because like centered and like other one back foot, it's only possible with fork setup with short decks where you have the similar forks on the front and the rear, having to mount similar angle base plate angle trucks over there. But yeah, sort of answer. And fork setups, I find it to be a little lower than the HST stuff.
Yes.
So,
yes.
Thank you. And it takes a big heart to say that like one is not like thing to accept what HST. It's amazing.
Well, hey, I'm not a critic. I'm a designer. I'm not a critic. Critics can say whatever they want. Right? Because normally critics aren't in the business. They don't have a vested interest. They just throw opinions around. Right?
True.
Every now and then a critic will turn into a branded manufacturer, and that's when the gloves come off. That's when guys like you need to hold them accountable for, hey, weren't you a critic before? And now you're competing against the people you badmouthed. That's when guys like you can need to take the gloves off and give them a hard time. But since I'm not a critic, I'm just a manufacturer. I don't have the right to say anything bad about anybody else's system. It would be wrong. I'm just trying to do what I like and the way I. And let me address the height issue of the HSC truck. They are quite high. They have to be, because we would like to ride these big wide boards. And if you lean too much, you'll drag the railing on the ground. Not the railing, the rail. You'll drag the deck on the ground. So we have to have them a little bit higher. And frankly, when you're using a pole, it doesn't matter that you're an inch or two higher off the ground. You just make the pole a little longer, because you're not pushing anyway.
Oh, yeah, true.
Yeah.
Sir, how does thrust work in a centered back foot and a rear axle setup on a very long deck, as in like over 40 inches?
Yeah.
Does a rider's height help, to a advantage in the situation?
Okay. I have found that the longer the wheelbase, the more geometrical advantage the rider has toward pumping easier. I don't know what the practical limits are. I've done it on a 72-inch deck down to about a 45-inch and even smaller. The physics of the physics of how the forward thrust works is the same, but the wheelbase definitely helps. I'm not totally convinced I understand it well enough to write it down in a blog yet. But I do feel that whenever I ride on these boards. So our 45-inch board, our 60-inch board with the 55.0 is easier for me to pump than the 45-inch deck is. I know that's true under my own feet. Now, the rider's height, does the rider's height make a difference? I think it does. I think a longer leg rider is going to be able to push the board farther to the left and to the right easier than somebody with shorter legs. I think that's true. I'm 6'2", and I am very comfortable on a 60-inch long board. I can ride a 45-inch board, but I don't like to be on a 30-inch board.
I understand.
I just don't feel comfortable on it. But I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, it does. It does.
Okay.
Sir, I saw HST's setups comparison image for riding style and turning radius. How does this knowledge of knowing one's turning radius help a rider in scenarios like oversteering, preventing collisions, downhill, uphill, and ultraskate events? Yeah.
The turning radius is really important for the place you're riding in. Okay. So, if the turning radius is less than the deck length of the board, it can be pretty sketchy. Okay. It can be pretty sketchy, and it's not intuitive. If the turning radius is much longer than the deck length, it's also a little off-putting. It doesn't really make sense to somebody approaching the board for the first time. Notwithstanding that, most LDP boards have very long turning radiuses. Yes. All right. And so do any board with the 0 truck on the rear. In fact, the longer the deck with the 0 in the back, it gets to be a really long turning radius. And that's only a problem if you're trying to make turns, sharp turns in a closed space to avoid an obstacle. But if you're on a long straight track, like any of the ultraskate, tracks, you don't need the turning radius because you're going relatively straight. But that is the trade-off. So if you want a tight turning radius deck, you probably want a centered setup, because you're getting twice the steering, one from the front and the negative of the negative turning of the rear, so you get twice as much turning.
That's amazing. Yeah, the article absolutely has everything, actually. So people have to understand about the racetracks and read this article, and they can customize their own boards depending upon the trucks they need, and the trucks that SUPskate and Hamboards offer, like 0, 20, 40, and 55. That's amazing. That's awesome.
Well, what I like about our system is everything is interchangeable. And you can just, it's like switching fins on a surfboard, because if you want a smaller fin that day, then you just switch it out. And it's different riding styles too. I hate to make people figure out how my whole truck system works before they can decide what to buy. It doesn't help us sell product, because we confuse the heck out of people, because the system can do so many different things. They don't know which one they want. So we have to do a lot of education. And that's another reason why I have this blog, because some people really want to understand the technology before they buy or before they choose. And some people look at this and their eyes glaze over and they're like, just tell me what I want. So I have to listen to the words and hope I get it right.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So for long distance pumping, what is more important, fun or technical stuff? Like, do you suggest a blend of both?
I think when you first start getting into it, you should just have fun. I mean, get your Sector 9 with reverse kingpins or gull wings, loosen those trucks up as loose as you can stand to have them. I love loose trucks. Okay. And then go out and, have fun playing around in small spaces. Okay. And it's exactly like when I learned to ride a bicycle as a little boy, right? As soon as the training wheel's off and I learned how to pedal the bike all on my own, I didn't immediately go on a 5-mile ride, right? I rode around in my neighborhood. I set up little ramps to jump over things. I just got really good at small spaces, right? And then one day I was like, I might want to go to the candy store. I had 5 cents in my pocket. I'm like, I wonder if I could go over back behind the church, over the school parking lot, and go to that candy store. Well, then I started riding long distances, and then I got a different bike, and then I started riding really long distances, and I had to get longer distance bikes. It's really no different. So 100% I recommend people just get the pole. Don't worry about buying the skateboards. Just use your old skateboard. I hope it's not a penny, because you can't get both feet on it. That's kind of hard. But get a wide board, loosen up the trucks, and then just get used to using the pole. So you're pushing in using the pole, and then later, if you want to really look cool and do surfing maneuvers, you could get one of our shorter boards with the fancy trucks, or if you want to do LDP and you just want to use the pole, you can use one of our boards for that.
Cool. I understand. So it's a blend of both. Have fun initially, and then if you want to push yourself beyond the horizon, you can get to wherever you want.
I think it is. I think it's both. It's all fun. I think I kind of think of our SUPskate in 2 categories of, like, on the shorter boards that are more turny with the centered setup. I think that's more like SUP surfing, if you will. And then I think with the other setup, it's more like SUP racing or SUP touring. The board is more stable because it doesn't turn as much. I can go slower, longer distances. I think it's all fun.
Cool. So tell us about your wonderful experience of Miami Ultraskate 2025.
Okay. First of all, it was extraordinarily good weather. Okay.
Oh, that's awesome.
And what was really neat about this year was for the first all morning and all afternoon, the wind was from the west, which is very unusual. So that meant that as you were coming down the back stretch, so first turn, second turn, between second turn and third turn, that long back strip, which is so smooth. They must have put polyurethane or something down on that apron. It was like butter, and you had a tailwind, and everybody was pumping. It was so cool. And then when you came into pit row, you had a headwind, but you know, there's some shelter there, and you could kind of sneak up against the wall, and you could kind of avoid most of that headwind, and you could just rip down the nice smooth pit row. So it was just amazingly fast for the first part of the day, and it wasn't too hot. And then at night the wind switched, and it started coming, but it was a lower wind, so the conditions were just amazing. And the other part that was so fun for me is, I think 4 or 5 years ago when I went to Ultraskate, there were maybe 2-3 people out there with a pole, maybe 3. Okay. This year there were 25.
That's awesome.
I told Andy, as Andy was blowing by me again for the 25th time, you know, he's like, "How you doing, Donnie?" And I said, "Hey, I've already won." And he goes, "What do you mean?" I said, "Did you see how many poles there were out here? I've already won."
That's awesome. So definitely people, the visibility has grown over there.
And I think that skaters have a bad reputation for being, you know, exclusive, and it's not like that at all. People are so friendly and curious and supportive of anybody who screws up the nerve to go to a 24-hour event. You know, we're already friends, right? Because we all got something wrong in our head.
Yeah. That's awesome.
So it was fantastic. It's like a reunion. I get to see people I haven't physically seen, you know, from out west and from Europe, and it's just remarkable. Awesome. I think that I personally feel like 24 hours is just too dang much for me. So what I do is I pretty much do a 12-hour in my own head, and then once I hit my 12 hours, I'm done.
No,
I don't need to skate the whole 24 hours. I got other fun stuff to do.
Yeah.
So
I understand. That explains our 6th question. So our previous question. Yeah. So awesome. So I think I have come to the end of this interview session. I've asked everything that I need to, but except for one thing which is still in my head, like which you answered about a rear truck without the bushings. You know, when you said like it was 0. You were talking about HST or the reverse kingpin trucks. When you don't have bushings, it'll be loose, right? Like how would be stays?
Oh, okay. That's something I was exaggerating. Okay. With my rear truck or a reverse kingpin truck, you shouldn't ever take out the bushing. I just mean loosen it up so that it's really loose. But if you want to use a reverse kingpin and change the board to a back foot centered turning, you're going to have to wedge that rear truck down to like 10 degrees or 20 degrees or something like that. Now you're going to have to wedge the heck out of that thing to make the rear so that it doesn't turn as much as the front does. And you want the rear to be fairly loose. Otherwise, when you twist the board, the wheel will lift up off the ground. And you don't want one wheel on the ground in the back. You always want 2 wheels on the ground in the back. Or one. Nobody's done it yet, but I can imagine somebody's going to have one really wide wheel in the back. One of these days, somebody's going to do that.
Okay.
That there's no reason to have 2 wheels in the back. You can LDP with 1 wheel in the back.
Yeah, but there is a electric skateboard like C-board or something. It has only one wheel in the rear. But
Yeah.
anyways, thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. Thanks for
You're welcome.
doing this interview. People in the long distance skateboard community are very supportive. Like, I come from a very long distant land like India, and people know, like, I haven't ridden many of the professional skateboards, and I have very minimal knowledge. I ride the own welded long distance skateboard. I don't know which category it would be coming under. Like, people always include me. They were very inclusive, especially user. And this is our third interview, minus one, which is yeah. So I'm very grateful from the bottom of my heart. Thank you.
Hey,
so much,
if you edit this, and I would like for the viewers to know, they can come and read my blog, and if they are confused and have a question for me, or if they think I got something wrong, I want to know it. And I will edit this thing so that it's correct. Okay. Because I wanted to, I'm sharing this knowledge with people for the purposes of contributing something to the sport. So they can just contact me. You go to the website and you say, chat with us. You can say, hey, can you have Donnie call me? Because I'm confused about this, or I think he got this wrong, or I think you should add something. This blog is like an evergreen tomb and should be, and you can see at the bottom, there are lots of contributors. I mean, there's 25 people on there that helped me do this.
Awesome.
And I can certainly add more people. If somebody has something to add, or a descriptive section, I'm 100% for it.
Cool, sir. I'll just keep this from start to end just as it is.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.